you.
Thanks, Leon. And good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here to shepherd a great discussion of financial and technology industry experts on the subject of what's happening at the point of sale. And we've talked a lot over the course of the morning about what consumers are doing around the world to take advantage of mobile technology. Now we shift focus to innovation that's taking place on the merchant side of the equation. Obviously relevant to the consumer in terms of what choices they'll have at the point of sale, and also relevant to innovation taking place in the industry because, as Carol alluded to, there are two halves to our industry. There's the acquiring side that's focused on the merchant and enabling the merchants to accept new technology, and of course the issuing side focused on arming consumers with the capabilities to take advantage of all the new innovation in our industry. ETA, as Leon mentioned, is the trade association of the payments industry. We're based in Washington. Just to set the context for you, the definition of the payments industry has changed significantly, and as the trade association in the industry, we've seen the number of companies that want to be considered payments companies increase significantly in just the last couple of years. Our more than 500 members include a lot of legacy financial institutions, card networks, and processors, but it also includes great technology companies like Apple and Samsung and Microsoft and Intel and AT&T and Verizon, all of whom want to take advantage of all the revolution and innovation that's taking place in payments. And what I think is most exciting, and we're going to hear from our first speaker, is the way in which the financial side of our industry, the payment side of our industry, has embraced all this innovation that's taking place at the point of sale. And the reason for that is quite simple. We all share a common interest in enabling consumers and our merchant customers to take advantage of this innovation because it gets more transactions on the network, it makes the network more safe and secure and reliable, and increases the utility of electronic payments for consumers and their favorite merchants. And I think, as you think philosophically about all the changes that are taking place in our industry, what's most exciting about this is the way in which incumbent players, including companies that have been doing this for literally hundreds of years, are embracing the next generation of technology. And that's really embodied by our first speaker. I have the pleasure and the honor of introducing Bill Gadja, who is from Visa, a company you're all familiar with, a technology company and a payments company. And Bill really embodies that incredible change that's taking place in our industry in his very own background. Before coming to Visa, Bill was a technology and telecom guy, background at Ericsson, at Bell Canada, and really brings to Visa the ability to bring together both the payments and technology side of our industry. Bill's day job is SVP and Head of Innovations and Strategic Partnerships at Visa, recently relocated right here to New York, and we're delighted to have him here, and it's my pleasure to introduce Bill.
Thanks, Jason. It's obviously great to be here at Columbia. Thank them for hosting this event. It's also great to see a lot of my colleagues, Thierry from Orange in France, and obviously my colleagues from the other payment networks. I'm going to talk a little bit about tokens as a key part of the evolution of the commerce ecosystem. But to start, I just have a short video that I think brings to life some of the changes in technology that Jason's talking about.
Visa makes it easier to pay and get paid in the mobile age. Introducing Visa Digital Solutions, a complete set of services and tools for an end-to-end digital payment experience. Now, any device can be used for secure commerce. Visa Token Service protects consumers, merchants, and financial institutions. It replaces the 16-digit primary account number with a digital token to process online payments and transactions initiated with a mobile device. At the same time, Visa has made it easier to embed payment experiences into mobile applications. Visa PayWave for mobile lets consumers make payments using NFC or new emerging technologies, and Visa Checkout simplifies online or in-app purchases. Jane is at the mall, and all she'll need for shopping is her phone. On the way to the smoothie shop, she receives an offer to enable it for digital payments. She accepts the offer, confirms her identity, and her credit card info is provisioned on the phone as a digital token. Using the application with Visa PayWave on an NFC-enabled terminal, she makes the purchase. Now it's off to buy some clothes, but the size she wants isn't in stock. No problem. She finds the item on the merchant's website, orders it, and then pays for it using Visa Checkout. Now her shipment is on the way. The future of payments is happening now with Visa, providing the simplest and most secure digital and mobile payment solutions.
So this is where we hope the future of payments is going, this integrated, rich, kind of seamless, frictionless commerce experience where the whole ecosystem understands that consumers love to shop and they hate to pay. So, one of the things that I think about every day is how we put payments farther and farther back in the process so people can enjoy, the attributes of mobile or the attributes of all these connected devices and conduct commerce and eliminate the idea of payments. And the best example that I think brings this to life is I've been using Uber for 4 years. It's probably my favorite app on my phone. And if you think about what Uber's done, it's not only transformed, which was a pretty clunky transportation service, and everything from the reliability of the cabs, any knowledge about the drivers, language barriers, but most importantly for me, it's eliminated payment, right? And this is true if you use it in the United States, but I've used Uber in France, in the UK, I've used it in Shanghai. And so it's not just the convenience of payment going away in that case. It was, I didn't have to understand Shanghainese or Mandarin. I didn't have to understand the local tipping practices. I didn't have to have any money with me to understand how this commerce transaction was going to take place. And so increasingly the way I think about commerce is people love to shop and people hate to pay. And for me, that should be the future. But if we're going to get there at scale and with the kind of security and robustness that people are used to in terms of the payment ecosystem, the whole system had to evolve. And all of us, not just us at Visa, my colleagues at American Express and MasterCard, have all started to invest heavily along with our banks and processors and merchants on the evolution of payments. Whether it's thinking about our physical networks and transforming those to APIs to allow third-party developers to access some of the attributes of our network, investing in and sometimes acquiring new payment technologies, and you can almost read every week about a payment network or a bank or a new technology emerging on the scene that's involved in the payment ecosystem. And for us, the next evolution as we think about these solutions was tokenization. And when I look at tokenization today, I think we look at one implementation, Apple Pay and I guess more recently the Apple Watch, but I actually think that tokenization in the medium term will be transformative for payments, and I want to talk about that for a few minutes. So why tokenization? If you think about it, the reason why we had to invent a token standard, and I mean we, the industry, along with our colleagues at Amex and American Express, is because the growth of digital payments are making the protection of data more important than ever. We've evolved in the past previous years from a very traditional kind of e-commerce experience on a laptop to a mobile centricity, right? Where a lot of in-app payments are taking place and actually taking over the e-commerce volumes on traditional devices. Interconnected devices. We've put a payment token now on a car because we know that it's not just your mobile phone or a PC that's going to transact, it'll be your car. It'll be your set-top box in your house. It could be your white good. It'll certainly be a smart meter. And so how do we connect all of these devices with payment credentials in a way that's secure, but at the same time takes advantage of the abilities that mobile devices and connected devices have? And so, in the previous panel, they mentioned that when the payment networks compete against cash and check, our market share is about 25 to 30% at Visa. The minute cash is digitized, it jumps to about 60%. And so Visa wanted to support virtually every one of these new innovations we saw that enabled mobile devices or connected devices to conduct commerce. The problem we had was that most of them involved putting PANs, personal account numbers, in some way into the open or at risk. Not in the case of, if we think about our early implementation with Orange, where you're, now a 10-year-old NFC standard, put a payment credential onto a very secure and standardized hardware-based secure element that could make a payment at the point of sale, and we all very well understood that. But increasingly, all of these innovations were asking us to put payment credentials in an app, or in some kind of software-based secure element, or in some cloud-based NFC solution, or in a car that wants to use low-energy Bluetooth as the last mile. And we wanted to support that because we love digital payments, but we didn't want to put the PANs in the open. And so the industry got together and said, if we could replace these PANs with a global and scalable system of tokens, we could allow for this innovation and allow the commerce ecosystem to take off. And so as I said, we worked with our colleagues at MasterCard and American Express to develop this global standard that recently has been launched in its first implementation with Apple Pay. And I'll talk for a few minutes about where we see tokens going. But first, for those of you that don't know, let me just describe for a few minutes how tokens work. If you think about a token, what it really is it looks a lot like your PAN. You know, for Visa, a token is a 16-digit number that starts with a 4. For my colleague Monkey Wu over there, it's a 16-digit number that starts with a 5, and American Express, a 15-digit number that starts with a 3. And that's important because we built the system in a way that allowed all the players to take advantage of the infrastructure that they had in place. Right? So these tokens look a lot like an account number, but they're not your underlying account number that you have on that plastic card. And there's two really important elements then when you think about tokens. There's a token vault, and that's simply a database where the list of tokens that are assigned to an actual account number that's on your plastic card are stored. And then there's a token service where we can provision these tokens on virtually any device and manage their life cycle from the initial provisioning to where we have to refresh those tokens as devices change or cards expire. And so the three networks, again, have launched our token service, first with Apple, and are looking at rolling out for many use cases and in many markets around the world. But what's unique about tokens then compared to just a normal 16-digit number that's on your card? I think the first thing is, try that? Right. Try that? All right. I think the first important difference is that these tokens are virtual account numbers, that they're not your actual PAN. And so as you put your payment credentials in myriad devices, you're actually not putting, after you register them, your actual card number in any of them. I think the second thing that's important is that we've developed a token system in a way that binds that token to the device or to the app or to the merchant where you've put it. So even if somehow someone cracks that device or gets into that merchant database, that token can't be used outside of that context. Right? I think the other important thing we've done is take advantage of the system so merchants don't have to change their point of sale systems because the token looks a lot like your PAN. We've had to do some work with the issuers and the processors so they could tell the difference between when a PAN's being presented and when a token's being presented. But by and large, these changes were minor and allow these token implementations to go very quickly, but also, as I said, in a way that's scalable across the world. And so literally what happens then when you provision a token, and I'll give Apple Pay as an example, you decide to sign up for Apple Pay and it asks you to put in one or more cards. And so you can either take a photograph of your card and it captures that information, or you can manually key enter your card information. And that number is sent now to the token service where we say, actually, Apple doesn't want the accounts on the phone. They want a token on the phone for added security. So we translate that account number into a token that's unique for Apple Pay, and we send down a couple of questions, depending on the bank, that verifies that that card is yours, that you want to provision, and then that phone is yours. We call that the identification and verification process, and that only happens once. And once we do that, forever that PAN, that account number that you were putting into your phone becomes a token that's bound to Apple Pay. And as I said, you can do that with the three major networks, and I understand that this week Apple finally announced that Discover's on board as well. And you can put multiple accounts into Apple Pay. And it works very similarly for any future implementations that you're going to see. The customer puts in a PAN, it's replaced by a token, and that token is reused over and over again. The other advantage of tokens, of course, is it gives us flexibility in terms of how often we want to provision them. So in the case of Apple Pay, that token is secured on a hardware on the device. And so that token can be pretty persistent because it's on a very recognized piece of hardware that we've certified many times over. If we look at cloud-based solutions, where the token is in a cloud and information is being passed from the cloud down to an app, well, we can refresh those every week or after 10 transactions. Right? So we can do this over and over again and develop the token service in a way that respects and makes most use out of the payment solution. And so that's really how tokenization works. So for my last few minutes then, I want to talk about where we think tokens are going and just to summarize why we think the benefits are going to be transformational. So first of all, as you know, we've launched Apple Pay and now Apple Watch. Our first priority across the networks, I think, is to put as many banks as possible into that solution. And I think we're up to more than 500 banks in the United States now that can support Apple Pay. We eventually want to get to the many thousands of banks in the United States that can support Apple Pay. And so that's one of our first priorities. And we're onboarding, multiple dozens of banks every week to Apple Pay. Our second priority are new use cases for tokens. Samsung Pay recently announced in Barcelona. They're going to launch later this year. Android Pay, or the next iteration of Google Wallet, is going to launch later this year. And we're going to see many, many other kinds of token requesters with their wallets that want to launch with tokens. We're also focusing on internationalization. Today, tokens are available in the United States, but later this year, available in Western Europe, and key markets, initially focusing on where NFC is predominant, but over time, tokens will be available throughout the world as new wallets and new commerce solutions roll out. And then the third thing we're looking at is how we go from different use cases for tokens. As I said, right now it's focused on kind of mobile wallets and NFC, but now we're going to see merchants come to us to say, I don't want to have all my card on database. I want to have tokens on my database to reduce the risk of a breach or the effects of a breach and to secure my database and get rid of all those cards on file and replace them with tokens. We're going to see the Internet of Things, connected watches. We're working with Swatch on putting a token in a watch. We're going to look at cars with tokens. We're going to look at set-top boxes and routers with tokens. And so you're going to see, I think, tokens expand in 2 or 3 dimensions based on the principles that the slide talks about. The ability to uniquely identify that token and contain it within that commerce experience. So even if it's somehow breached, it can't really get out. To continue to safeguard your personal information so that if you lose a device, you don't have to replace your underlying card, or that card credential, at great expense to yourself, the merchant, if in case of a breach, or to the bank. And finally, this seamless experience where, because it's based on the 60 years of investments all the payment networks have made in the ecosystem, it's pretty seamless to the customer, it's seamless to the merchant, and the ecosystem can drive these token solutions out at scale. So I just wanted to provide kind of a brief overview of where we think tokens are, how we think they're going to help the ecosystem drive forward in terms of innovation, and obviously welcome any questions when we get to the panel that you have on tokenization or anything else Visa does. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill. So as Bill mentioned, tokenization obviously is a technology that's driving a lot of change at the point of sale, driven by the desire to secure transactions, but it's part of an overall package of new security techniques and technologies that the payments industry is rolling out. Tokenization is obviously vitally important, as Bill mentioned, to making sure that account numbers aren't available to cyber criminals in the clear. But encryption also makes sure we secure networks. And EMV, the chips in cards that we're all starting to experience, is really driving a lot of upgrades of equipment at the point of sale, and also driving mobile payments usage and deployment, because of course NFC, which Bill mentioned is in Apple Pay and Samsung Pay and other technologies, is the wireless form of EMV. So as merchants upgrade to EMV-capable chip readers, they also automatically get the capability to include NFC wireless phone acceptance capabilities as well. So a great technology and great advancement taking place at the point of sale. But merchants, who are the customers of all of these technologies, are also exploring other options for enhancing the mobile payments experience, because of course mobile payments is about security and technology, but it's also about increasing the usability, the reward, if you will, of using mobile payments. And so a significant number of large merchants joined together a few years ago to form an organization called MCX, which is on the cusp of launching a new product called Currency that you're going to hear a lot about from the guy that's out there talking about it every day and helping his owner members spread the word about this cool new product and service. And I want to add a personal note in inviting Andy to the podium. His new boss was just announced, Brian Mooney, who starts on Monday, as I understand it, a seasoned expert in payments who used to be on the board of ETA, who's a wonderful guy, and very exciting for MCX as they bring on dynamic leadership to launch the product this year. And I know you're all interested to hear about what the nation's merchants see as the mobile payments opportunity. So let me introduce Andy Schober, who's the Chief Sales and Business Development Officer of MCX. Andy, welcome to the podium. I don't know. Do we have any lav mics, Jason? Ask and you shall receive. Thank you very much.
That works great.
You good to go?
Well, thank you very much. We are honored to be here with the group this morning. It's a pleasure to be in front of you, and Jason, thank you. May I advance one slide just for moving off the Visa presentation?
My apologies.
I don't have a deck for you today. We chose to come instead and talk about what we see is going on in the space, and not just technology, but what we think is going to help disrupt it. Because I think we're at a very exciting time for mobile right now. And I'm reminded of Steve Jobs saying, you got to start with a customer experience and you work back to the technology. This isn't about technology driving disruption. It's about what's it really going to take to get consumers engaged. So for those of you who don't know MCX, aside from Jason's introduction, we're a group of merchants that came together to try and influence how mobile is going to evolve and what it means for them and their customers. The group is made up of mom and pop companies like Walmart, Target, Exxon, Wendy's, Dunkin' Brands, and others, collectively with revenues of about $1.2 trillion a year. We have over 450 million customers walk through our doors every week right now. Every day they'd be much happier, I think, but every week. And what they're seeing is what you've been hearing about today. The way people interact with shopping is changing. And I think Bill nailed a lot of good points up there, but there's one I'd take an issue with. We don't think customers hate paying. We think customers don't think about paying because it works well today. The companies that you've heard of have built an infrastructure that allow people to pay in a manner where it's not part of the shopping experience. And we believe when you look at why payments have taken a while to evolve, it's because it's pretty easy to dig into your back pocket or to dig into your wallet or purse and make a payment because you feel safe in so doing. So what MCX is about, really, when you look at mobile, is trying to find a means by which, first, merchants can better engage with their customers in a digital world. They want to improve the shopping experience, build on what's out there today, and actually make it better. Because just a few years ago, people were only going into the store to buy, and then came e-commerce and m-commerce. And if anybody sits out and tells you they know what the world is going to look like in 5 or 10 years, be it around technology, be it around the way it works, I think they're kidding themselves. The space is young. We've got lots of the world's finest companies trying to figure it out, but nobody's got it figured out yet. And that makes this a very exciting space to be in. The second reason the MCX merchants came together was to try and protect the data around their interactions with their customers. And we would propose to you that, in fact, when you look at the future of mobile, the greatest battlefield isn't around the payment itself, it's around the monetization of the customer experience. Who controls the interaction between consumers and merchants, and how can that be leveraged? And as you might imagine, merchants have a very big stake in that. One might call it an existential threat to whether they can continue to have a direct relationship with their customers and they can grow and serve those customers. And third, those of you that know MCX know that there's issues around bringing some balance to the payments ecosystem. Cost might be one of those terms often associated therewith. And that's a meaningful number for many merchants. When you look at a lot of them, it's the single largest expense they pay after payroll or the space. And as this evolves, and Bill hit a great point talking about tender shift As payments move from cash, traditionally a lower cost, though not free form of payment, to credit and debit and others, it actually is going to have a meaningful earnings per share impact on merchants out there. That said, if you don't have customers walking in the door or going to your e-commerce site or shopping on their phone, payment costs don't make a lot of difference, do they? And as our merchants have watched the space evolve, and I think over the last 3 years it's been fascinating, because 3 years ago, when I joined MCX before we launched it, we were listening to players in the space, some of whom are retrenching and coming back now saying, mobile's going to take off like this. We've hit the hockey stick. Within 3 years, a third of all your transactions are going to be done by mobile. That happen? Why? I think if you look at the merchants that have been the leaders in this, the ones that have been successful, it's because they've changed the experience. You hear references to Uber. That fundamentally changed how we engage getting transportation. I use it all the time. People are comfortable giving out their location. 5, 6 years ago, people said, no way people are ever going to let you know where your phone is. But you know why you do? Because when I was standing outside last night trying to get downtown to dinner and looking at people waving for cabs, and I could hit a tap of a button and know that in 3 minutes in a car I recognized I could hop in and be at my dinner, that was worth it, wasn't it? Look at who the biggest player in mobile is today in the United States, Starbucks. Using technology that 5 years ago people said the QR code, woof, woof, dog, really, nobody wants a QR code, it's not sexy. They've got 17% of their customers today engaging by mobile because they made it about loyalty and speed of service and being able to get what they want, and they can track the consumer behavior around what they're doing. What we're working on with merchants now is tough stuff. It isn't just the payment. It's how do you integrate with loyalty systems and get offers out and do things like if you're going to fill up your car with gas, what if you had the ability to activate the pump and pay from inside the car? Pretty nasty winter in New England this year, or New York, I think one of my coldest. If you could stay inside the car for an additional minute, does that have any appeal? The feedback from our merchants that are in production now are getting also, there's a security issue to it. We're having customers say, you know, if I'm not outside at night with my purse and having to pay, that feels pretty good. Things like that are changing sit-down dining. Last night when we finished dinner, and it was fairly late, we sat and waited for the check for 15 minutes. What did that do to my feelings about the restaurant, do you think? Took a great meal, 2 fine bottles of wine, and a cocktail, and actually turned it into a negative. But there's tough stuff to this too. I mean, our merchants are rolling out this year sit-down dining where when you get your check, there'll be a code on it. You can scan the code. You can make payment. You can get a tip. You can authorize the transaction and you can leave. But you know what the last yard is and the toughest part? Getting back integration to that restaurant system so that as you're leaving the restaurant, you're not chased down in the parking lot with somebody saying, hey, knucklehead, you forgot to pay. Because I guarantee you that's worse than sitting there waiting for the check for 15 minutes. But those are the things we believe that it's going to really take to make mobile successful and get consumers engaged about it. And I think if you look at the state of the market today, there's a lot of companies trying to solve this. Some vertical solutions tailored just for dining, some tailored for other pieces. Apple, Google, MCX, Samsung, and others. Some of the finest companies in the world all trying to figure this out. And it's tough. I've done 5 startups in my life. We are a startup. This is the toughest one we've ever encountered. And a lot of it's because those legacy systems that retailers have in place are tough to integrate so that you can deliver better service and better steaks than you've got out there today. What you're going to see from MCX in 2015 is we're moving from, we've got a number of merchants that are in production today doing transactions, but they started out with their employees before they went to the public. You know why? I was standing at a store the other day, and I use Apple Pay. It's handy. And I was in line behind somebody who couldn't make it work, and there wasn't somebody there in the store to help them do it. You need somebody who can say, gosh, I know how that works, let me help you. And we believe having merchants that can say, hey, here's how it works, you put your thumb on the button here, now you can make it work. Our merchants are starting with their staff so that when you as consumers go in, you've got somebody there who can help you and ensure that that first experience is a good one. Because we would argue in customer service, it's not baseball. You don't get 3 strikes. You're going to get 1, maybe 2 if you're lucky. And we need to ensure that we're making the investment so that when people go and give it a try for the first time, that they actually walk away saying, hey, you saved me time. I was able to have my loyalty information captured in a single pass and the coupons that I'd accumulated. And so I get my savings at that time and I'm out the door and it felt like a positive shopping experience. So as we look at the space, that's where we believe the market's going to define who's successful. Those companies that can listen to consumers. And what we're hearing consumers say is it's not about the payment. Can you help me save time, save money, make the experience work for me a little bit better, whether in a merchant app or in a common app to do so, and then be able to securely allow me to get a transaction processed and out the door. And there's going to be some great competition in this. We think it's going to take years to sort out, and that makes it an exciting space. But the ones who are going to succeed are the ones who've listened to the consumers and actually figured out a way, like you're already seeing companies doing, where they can deliver that proposition that really resonates with customers out there. With that, thank you for the opportunity to present this morning.
Thank you, and I'll invite our panelists to come join us up front, including Bill and Andy. And while we're doing that, I want to set the context for you, give you some numbers to think about why we're all talking about mobile payments at the point of sale. Now, there are more in the United States. Consumers carry 1.2 billion debit, credit, and prepaid cards in their wallets. So we know that paying using electronic payments is the preferred method for U.S. consumers to pay. We also know that consumers in the U.S. carry more than 330 million mobile phones. And the interesting thing to note about that is those mobile phones, about 4 years ago, about 50% of them that were sold were smartphones. Today, it's more than 85% of them are smartphones. So there are now more mobile phones in service in U.S. consumers' pockets than there are consumers in the U.S. So you combine consumer love for mobile devices and their love and preference for paying electronically, and you have the recipe for the success of mobile payments and the reason we're seeing so much activity in this area. Let me introduce our panelists who have joined us up here on stage. You've already met Bill and Andy, and it's my pleasure to introduce, as we go down the line from there, Brett King, who is the founder of Movin, the world's first mobile bank account. Next to Brett, we have Mung Wu, who is the Executive Vice President of Digital Market Execution at MasterCard. And we have the ever-present Stefan Happ, who is the General Manager of Online and Mobile North America for American Express. It's nice to have our card network friends, at least 2 of the 3 of them, sitting next to each other. I promise that's not by design. Mung, I actually want to start with you because you also bring to the panel that great mix of technology and payments industry experience. You actually spent a long time at Orange, in fact, helping build and launch Orange Money in the market. Can you tell us your perspective, both from your history in technology, telecom, and broadband, and your current role at MasterCard? How are we doing as an industry telling the story of technology innovation? How are we doing telling it to merchants? How are we doing telling it to consumers? How are we doing getting the deployment of mobile payments out there and getting away from these plastic cards?
Right, but first of all, we don't want to get away from the plastic cards.
Right,
we want
course.
to add to the plastic cards. I think that the vision is now very, very clear. Yes, I think that all of the players in the ecosystem, whether the banks, the merchants, etc., we all want digital payments and digital commerce to take place, whether it's in developed economies or in emerging markets. Whether it's in the developed economies or in the emerging markets, I think that all of the stakeholders of the industry, whether the traditional stakeholders, the banks, the merchants, or the new stakeholders like the telecommunication operators or the technology companies, I think that we're all committed to make digital payments happen. And I think that, back to what Bill was saying, I think that over the last few years, we have now built all of the foundational elements to really provide a very seamless and safe consumer experience. So I think that what is now in front of us is very much a question of scaling. So how do we scale? Yes, how do we distribute to consumers? How do we create value? And in the payment industry is an industry which requires scale. Yes. So I think that this is the major question that we have in front of us. I think the vision is clear. The foundational elements, such as tokenization, are now very, very clear. I think that the key priority for the next period of time is how do you distribute, how do you create compelling value propositions, and how do you scale the services?
And Stefan, let's talk about American Express's philosophy here. You obviously have played a role, I should note, as part of your biography, in bringing the prepaid market to American Express, Bluebird, Serve, other products that have not traditionally been part of the portfolio of American Express, but demonstrate that even for companies that have been around a very long time, American Express used to be in the private mail delivery service. It certainly transformed its business plan a number of times. Can you tell us philosophically American Express's approach to new technology at the point of sale and new consumer demands for commerce experiences?
So I'll make it brief because you've heard me many times, as you pointed
I
out.
have. I can never get enough of it.
Thank you. Okay. We want to be where our consumers are. That's really, in a nutshell, our philosophy. We're looking to participate in all the trends that are out there. Hence the comment earlier with... I'm sorry, can't hear me?
He's got a mic.
Is that better? No? Okay, let me try this one here. Okay. All right, take this.
You're
one.
fine.
How about we do the...
Yeah, the traditional way.
That's why mobile doesn't work yet. So, yes, so what I said at American Express, we want to be where our customers want to be. And that can be both the end consumers as well as our merchant community. And so we're looking to participate and are participating in all the trends that are out there. I do agree with the panel here and with a colleague from Visa also that tokenization is going to be is the crucial aspect with regard to cracking how you can create ubiquity. But I also think we still have opportunity to articulate clearly as an ecosystem, not as American Express, as to where the value truly is for the consumer. And I think there are two very specific use cases that cry out for solving. One is, I think, the area that Brett is looking to innovate in. And I'm personally looking to innovate in for some time, have been, which is how can you provide more comprehensive and cheaper banking services for people that don't enjoy that type of service today. And the second is, how do you solve mobile payments that occur on mobile devices? I mean, it's amazing how, I've been here for a couple of hours, how the conversation center around what happens at the physical point of sale, which really is not the issue. Whether I pay with my Apple Pay in a store here or my card is completely immaterial to me. But as I was sitting in the audience here, I booked a ticket for a concert in September at the Met Museum. And I'm a member, and I bought tickets there before, and I did it on my mobile phone, and I had to go through 15 fields. And I'm the guy that runs mobile payments at American Express. So I think that's really, that's where if someone can, I guess it's incumbent of all of us to solve that, but that's where I think my problems need to be solved.
So Brett, let's talk about innovation that Movin has brought to the market. Obviously, as a founder of Movin, you saw an opportunity to bring some traditional financial services in a way that traditional financial service providers hadn't been doing. So what's your approach to serving this new market?
Our approach was pretty simple. We said, in 2020, how does someone get a bank account? And what we realized was they would not go to a branch. They'd download it to their phone, and their phone would be their primary payment device. But it wouldn't work like a plastic card at all. Wouldn't work like a checkbook or an overdraft or a credit card. It would work fundamentally different because it doesn't have those constraints of a physical artifact. So it's going to be an information-based artifact, which means that the most important thing in a payment instance at the point of sale is not actually paying, but it's what happens before and what happens after that. And I think in reference to Bill's point about Uber, what Uber did was make the payment disappear in that experience, and the payment just became part of a great journey experience. You know, Venmo has taken social media and made payments social. What we've tried to do with Movin is take banking and try to make it about your financial wellness or financial health. And ideally for us, what we'd like to be able to do is just, right now you can download the Movin app, you can sign up in 2 minutes, and then we've got to wait for our friends at MasterCard to send us a plastic card, right? Ideally, you know, we all know that the PAN is the weakest link in security in this. Ideally, we wouldn't want to wait for a provisioned plastic card at all and just get a token straight on the phone, but we can't do that right now because you have to have a PAN and you provision that on the mobile. So that's something that you guys can certainly, you know, look at addressing. But for us, you know, I think the key to this is understanding that if you have the most efficient form of payment, it just happens. Right? Zero friction. And what we're trying to do right now is lower the friction. And the ultimate expression of a mobile payment in the future will be you walk into a store, you get the goods, and you know the transaction happens. And the ultimate expression of banking is not going to be about the card or the account number. It's about how much money you have and how you're using that effectively every day. And what Movin's trying to do is be that personal life coach around your money moments every time. And the most money moments you do every day is paying with a card right now. So they're the moments where we can provide the most value today.
Bill, I want to ask you a question that grew out of your presentation. You focused on tokenization, which obviously for those of us in the payments industry is a frequent topic of conversation. That's a bit of an understatement. But tokenization, we know, brings great security to a mobile transaction. Does that matter to merchants and consumers when they're deciding what to use as their payments tool? For example, merchants are in the process of upgrading to EMV capability, which we know is a very secure way of doing card transactions. But consumers don't necessarily care about that because we've taught them to not fear any liability for fraud. Can you talk a little bit about the interplay between the security of mobile payments transactions and what drives merchants to upgrade their infrastructure to accept mobile payments and what drives consumers to migrate their behavior to use mobile payments?
Yeah, I think ultimately Andy's right. You know, you've got to start at the consumer experience and work back. And I think what's going to drive adoption or scale, as Monkey said, is the ecosystem providing a compelling consumer experience. It won't be security. It'll be a user experience where security is an element of it. But kind of to the first part of your question, you know, one of the unfortunate things is you don't appreciate the role of tokenization or security until things break bad. And so consumers, when they're registering or using their card, or whether they get an EMV chip or register for iPhone or Apple Pay, it's really about the convenience until their underlying card is compromised and their transactions are declined and they're waiting for a new card from the bank. From a merchant perspective, you know, they've used PANs as one of the ways that they track their customers through their loyalty and marketing databases. And it was never intended for that, right? But as a result, they built these massive card-on-file databases, and they work great until there's a breach. And the merchant has to go through the expense and some of the trust issues around their database. Banks have to reissue cards. Networks have to explain to customers, you know, what's happening, and the customer has to wait again for a replacement card. And so I think that what we're trying to do with tokens isn't just to securitize the consumer or securitize the bank, you know, and we haven't solved all of it yet. It's how do we replace these cards on file with merchants to kind of render useless any breaches because they can't use those tokens outside of that merchant's environment. You know, how do we provide this idea of a token so a consumer says, well, if someone says it's a token wallet, I know it's secure because they never have my real card information, and I know that, you know, if I change devices or change my mind about this wearable, I'm not really, you know, adding any risk to the way I think about payments. We're a long way away from that with our first implementation of Apple Pay and now Apple Watch. But I think, again, I think tokens in the long term will be transformational with benefits to consumers and to merchants.
Andy, as MCX prepares to expand its market presence this year, one of the questions that I hear most is there going to be a single winner in the mobile payments marketplace? Is Apple going to beat Samsung Pay? Is Samsung going to beat Google? Is Google going to beat Android? Is Android going to beat MCX? And then on the technology side, is NFC going to be the winner? Or is it going to be barcodes? Or is it going to be cloud payments or a different implementation? Does there have to be a winner? Can services in the mobile payments environment, from the merchant's perspective in particular, can they coexist? Can the merchant accept different forms of mobile payments from their customer? Or does there have to be one technology pathway to make it justifiable for the merchant to make the significant investment in that kind of payment? What's your thought on whether there has to be a winner and a loser out there in mobile payments?
Wow, great questions. Only about 6 of them, so let me take a stab at it. I think you make a great point there. I mean, the challenge merchants face is they want to find a way to work with their customers. And the moment you choose one, particularly if it's device specific, you're not serving your entire customer base. So I think part of the answer is merchants have to find a way to work with customers regardless of whether they've got an iPhone or an Android or a Microsoft phone. And that creates challenges, not only from the IT investment, whether it's NFC or Bluetooth or who knows what's going to be next. I mean, a lot of our talk is de-risking that technology decision because in 3 years or 5 years, there's going to be more choices that make it work better. But I think there's a big part of this as well as investing in training the staff we talked about. Because, I mean, merchants today, you listen to them and they say, gosh, we have a hard time with our associates taking check, cash, debit, EBT maybe, gift and prepaid. Now you start throwing in dramatically different customer experiences that may vary from an Apple phone to an Android or on currency. And so I think, Jason, your question is best answered that says no. One shouldn't expect there to be one winner near term. I think this market needs a variety of options and merchants have to respond to that as they go forward to serve their customers. The key is how can they use ones that actually help them do more than just take the payment, but actually provide an experience that the customer comes back and keeps using rather than just trying once or twice. Does that cover at least 3 of the questions embedded in there?
You got them all.
All right.
And Munki, I want to ask you the same question, but from the consumer's perspective. That's the merchant's perspective on making the investment. MasterCard has actually long had this cashless campaign, even before Apple Pay and Samsung Pay came out on the market. The idea that in the US and around the world, we should focus on giving consumers whatever technology option they have and will use to get away from using cash. Does the consumer get confused by all these different options? Does that delay implementation, the migration of mobile payments? Or is that a good thing in that consumers have a variety of choices depending on what device they have and like to use? How are we doing on telling the story to consumers about making that migration?
Right. And I think that I'd like to bring a little bit of spice into our panel because I would like to respectfully disagree with Andy. I think that in the world of payments, standardization is a key component, yes, and global standards is a key thing, yes. Having a lot of payment options for the consumer and having a wide variety of ways of paying makes it very complex. Makes it very complex to communicate to consumers. Makes it very complex for merchants, even merchants, to accept different methods. I think that there's been a lot of debate around contactless, not contactless. Well, I think that to a certain extent the train has left the station. Yes, so contactless is a reality. It's deployed in millions of merchants worldwide. It's fully standardized. It's very stable. It's very mature. It's included in all of the point-of-sale terminals. It's now included in practically all of the smartphones. And from a consumer perspective, there will be some variations in terms of the consumer experience, but frankly, it's going to be basically the same. I approach my phone, I tap my card. It's a very simple, seamless experience. So yes, of course, we can talk about variants and etc. But I think that from a consumer experience point of view, simple is best.
Stefan, I'm interested in your perspective. Before I give Andy a little more time to think through his response. I'd like to give you the opportunity to pile on him a little. No, I'm just kidding.
I like spice as much as the next guy.
This is good. Stefan, Amex is a little unique in that you not only operate a payments network, you also issue your own cards. So you kind of operate on both sides of the equation, the acquiring side and the issuing side. What's your perspective on technology choices for consumers? Is that a good thing, or does it make it more confusing and delay the inevitable migration?
I don't think anything is going to delay the inevitable migration. I think it'll be accelerated by it'll be accelerated. The migration that we're all expecting, have been expecting for 5 years, which is why you've been hearing me for so long, is that, there just aren't the compelling use cases yet that will cause a seismic shift where the entire market goes from, plastic to non-plastic in a matter of months. I do think it will happen. I think when a number of things are coming together. And from an American Express perspective, I'm not going to give a pitch here. I mean, we have a slightly different view because we see both the acquiring and the issuing side, as you say. So there is a lot of opportunity to add value to our consumers here, if I can be parochial for a moment, by just providing them with more information in more real time that help them make more appropriate choices based on what they want. Saying that is the easy part. Right?
Brett,
I mean,
go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
I was-
Brett, I was just going to say, you obviously are taking on thousands of financial institutions as your competitors. What do you think about what consumers are looking for?
I'm the only one here that doesn't run a payments network.
Right.
Right?
You can afford to be neutral.
In that respect, we're payment agnostic in terms of the rails. Having said that, for us, the most important interaction is that someone taps their phone and they get immediate feedback that changes their payments behavior, right? And in that respect, then my view is that when Apple made the decision to go with NFC, which we'd been looking for 3 years since we started the company, that created a global standard for payments at the point of sale, primarily because the big problem you have is if you want to create a global, interoperable, open-loop system, you've got to get it in every point of sale system around the world, and the only way to do that currently is retooling the Amex, Visa, MasterCard, point-of-sale equipment, right? Otherwise, you get essentially a large closed-loop system within a group of merchants, right? Like Starbucks. And Starbucks is extremely effective at that. But the interesting thing is, I had Chuck Davidson on. I do a podcast radio show called Breaking Banks, so if you guys want to check it out, little plug. And Chuck Davidson came on. He is the creator of the Starbucks mobile payment app. And the one insight I got from that is he said, yeah, we never set out to do a mobile payments app. We just wanted to make behavior on the mobile sticky in the store. And I think, if you come at it from those two broad issues, then ultimately, yeah, NFC is definitely going to be standard, but the ones who win are going to be those that create really interesting, frictionless, and different payment experiences. And the one thing that could sort of change the mix in all of this is that doesn't necessarily have to be a duplication of the way we pay with a card today. It could be something very different behaviorally. And that's where if we keep thinking about QR codes versus NFC, we're missing the bigger picture when that's just part of a payment experience, and there's a whole lot of other opportunities to disrupt that experience that doesn't involve the modality of the payment.
Yeah, after all, Uber is not a transportation company. They don't own a single car. They're a payments network. So I think that's an important thing to think of. And also, we can all think about in our own lives the way in which the mobile devices we carry around have disrupted other markets. The iPhone's only been around since 2007. Nobody buys digital cameras anymore.
27 different business models that it's disrupted.
Nobody buys standalone GPS units anymore. Nobody buys CDs anymore. And nobody thought in 2007 that we would be carrying around our camera, our navigation device, and our music collection on our portable devices. So it's not that much of a stretch to think about the disruption that takes place. As we move to mobile payments, Bill, I want to talk to you about an important issue related to customer data, customer information, privacy. and how that factors into the roadmap. Because obviously consumers have an expectation in the plastic card world that their understanding of their interaction with their payment system is pretty simple. The plastic card doesn't know who you are, where you are, what you like, where you shopped last week. It's just a piece of plastic, but your phone knows all of those things. How do we factor in privacy issues, concerns of consumers about protecting data into this migration to mobile?
Yeah, it's an interesting point you raised, because actually when you swipe your plastic card, we do know where you are, we do know where you shopped the past week, and we use all of that information in real time and looking back 5 to 8 years to apply security to it in real time. So we give a fraud score to the bank to say, this looks like every transaction they've ever made, so here's a really high score, or they've never actually been here before, they never buy gas for that amount, yeah, this is a low fraud score. And so, we use that data today primarily for fraud on behalf of our issuers. I think that consumer education around privacy information is going to be a huge issue in terms of where and how this takes off. And so for me, we start with, and let's argue that Visa, as an example, has an extremely valuable data set, real-time and historic information on every single Visa transaction ever made, right? Arguably, that data is valuable outside of our fraud and analytics, but you can't get it wrong as an issuer, as a merchant, as a bank. You can't get it wrong once because the trust model breaks down. And so, while we can use it in other ways, we're being very careful about what our data strategy is for exactly the reasons you talked about. It starts with, permission every single time you engage a consumer in terms of the use of their data or how you're going to affect their privacy. It's opting in and multiple opt-ins, not opting out, right? It's levels of transparency, that I don't think we've hit in every use case right now. And we're going to sort out these different business models. Let's be clear, Google isn't in payments because they like payments. They hate payments. Like, they fired 4 sets of management who got it wrong, right? They're in payments because they want the data. That's the only reason they're in payments, right? And so they're going to continue at it because that data at the point of sale, that offline data, is extremely important. But I can tell you the ecosystem has to get it right, because if we get it wrong now, we will delay the uptake of mobile services because we break that trust model. And so I think the ecosystem is thinking about it very carefully.
So Andy, is that true for MCX, for your member owners as well? They're not interested, like Google, or the payments network itself is not the most interesting part. It's figuring out a way to make use of their customers' data, make use of that information, deepen the relationship with the customer through the payment mechanism, through the mobile device. And if that's the case, then how does customer privacy fit into the MCX model?
Well, good question again. Let me address that a couple ways. One, customer privacy and security of the data is critical. It's one of the founding principles we operate under. One only need to look over the last few years to see the impact that it has on merchants with what we've experienced in the United States. So the difference between privacy and ensuring we're operating in a manner that protects the data, much like Bill said, is paramount. How the merchants can use that with their customers and giving customers the ability to opt in. I mean, at the end of the day, the customer has to have control over what's happening with this. Not just from a legislative standpoint or regulatory, but that's how you actually improve your customer experience and your customer relationships. If I feel as a consumer you're misusing my information, I'm a lot less likely to continue to shop with you than somebody where I've got the bond of trust that we're talking about here. So while we're looking to deepen the relationship, it's got to be give and take, because consumers can walk down the street and shop any place they like. And I think the battleground over consumer privacy and what's done with that data is going to be probably the biggest part of what happens in the next few years in this space, and has to be managed very, very carefully, much like Bill said.
Thanks. I am now signaled to open up to the audience for questions. Rarely will you get an opportunity as unique. Unfortunately, nobody has any questions, so I guess we'll just move on. Rarely do you get an opportunity to see this kind of group arrayed before you without antitrust lawyers present. So you should definitely take advantage of it. David, we'll start with you over on the right.
I never need a microphone.
That's true.
For better or for worse. So, I've been just a lot of we know each other. Now, fascinating discussion about this. We've talked about it for a long time. But you'll note that pretty much any example that was brought up of successful has not been the point of sale. It's been Uber, a little bit with Starbucks, Chipotle nobody brought up, but that's the point. And in the US, where we don't have chip and PIN yet, and we won't for 10 years, trust me. So the payment is very, very fast and swiping. And there isn't any appreciable, I mean, Apple Pay I love, but we're geeks in here, we're the ones who are going to use it. But does it even matter at the point of sale? Or is it all about payment in the app? Remember, think of all the examples people cite about where it works well. It's not replacing a swipe. It's inside the phone.
Anyone want to take that one?
Yeah, it's true. The swipe works extremely well. The swipe works extremely well. So I think that from a consumer experience point of view, at the physical point of sale, swipe is best, tap is second, dip is third, and a relatively distant third because you have to dip, and very often you have to enter a PIN, at least outside of the US. And I agree, and I think that this is why, back to what Bill was saying earlier, tokenization is to make the seamless experience across all of the different channels, and I think that this is also why all of the payment networks are investing very heavily to improve the consumer experience in the online channels, whether it's for web browsing or for in-app payments.
I'll keep moving. Go ahead, please. You would be happy? Oh, well, in that case. Let's have people use the mic.
Thank you. Neil McAvoy from Consult Hyperion. This question may seem as if it's a criticism of tokenization, but it really isn't because I understand the purpose well. However, in a world where I might visit a grocery store and pay with my EMV card or swipe card, I might do an in-app payment from the same store to get some stuff delivered to my home. My fridge might order food for me when I'm running low on supplies in the future. All of these things will have their own tokens that will be changing perhaps on a different schedule. How then can the retailer best serve me and connect me as a person to each of those transactions and target relevant offers to me and reward my loyalty? And is this something that every retailer is going to have to figure out for themselves, or will the schemes be providing standards and toolkits to help?
Thanks.
Obviously, Andy's going to have a point of view on this. So, as I said earlier in an answer, we know that merchants today use PANs in many cases to drive their loyalty and marketing databases. And there is work to do on tokens. We've heard from many merchants as we've implemented tokens that they're not getting the same level of data or transparency because we've replaced those PANs with tokens. And we're working as an industry, again, with MasterCard and American Express, to add those data fields to the token experience so that information can be passed on so merchants can maintain those loyalty and marketing databases even in a token environment as opposed to a PAN environment. And we actually plan, I think, to announce a solution to that, by the end of this year. So I don't want to say that, we've worked out every facet of tokenization because it's brand new and, we had to do it for the first time with Apple Pay. But we are working really hard on that merchant experience because while we don't think that it's a good idea in the long term to use an actual PAN to drive a loyalty database because of the potential for breach, we do think that because of what happens at the point of sale, we should assist merchants to use that experience at the point of sale to drive those experiences. So we're working on it.
But in today's environment, a merchant would have to give something up to accept tokenization.
The question was, in today's environment, a merchant would have to give something up to accept tokenization. I don't know that that's correct, and my specialty is not tokenization. Many of our merchants are heavily involved and already working with the associations and their processors on tokenization today for the physical world. So be very clear, that effort's underway. I think the challenge, and the first question asked, really got around to the loyalty and how do I make it relevant, and what does the token do vis-a-vis the experience I'm having with the merchant? And I think the challenge is the diversity of merchants make that very different. Let's take fuel for an example. Fuel is different than groceries. You don't go into a convenience store with coupons, but Americans drive all over town to save 10 cents a gallon on gasoline. I mean, literally. We were sitting at dinner the other night and friends were late because she drove 15 minutes out of the way to fill up her SUV because she gets 10 cents off a gallon. For consumers to adopt mobile, they've got to get that. The table stakes are set. If you can't give them what they're getting today, why am I going to go pay more or sit there and manually key in information or route through your wallet to find the little fob to do so. So I think tokenization is part of it and a critical piece, but you can't confuse that with the other loyalty systems and others, and you've got to find a way to engage on the different levels that the merchants have with their other apps rather than just payment here. And that's the bigger challenge, I think.
Brooks?
Thank you, Jason. Brooks Harlow. You know, I come from the telecom side of this, and so one of the things that kind of slowed adoption of mobile in this country is we had such a great and ubiquitous wireline network, and we've got the same curse in payments. We've got such a great payment network. So maybe we need a little more friction. So no one's really brought up EMV here, but we're going to have the EMV transition this fall, at least starting. And so that's just a little slower. I use it regularly at one particular merchant, and it's just a little slower than a swipe. Is that enough to help drive some demand on the consumer side, number one? And related to that, does the European experience, which has been doing EMV for a long time, as well as mobile payments, does that tell us that perhaps EMV will help push us along in this path?
So the US does 25% of the world's credit and debit card transactions, but we carry 50% of the fraud. Okay? That's all you really need to know.
Yeah. Sorry.
Right, and when you look at the US, we have a real problem with payments. Okay, we have that problem with card fraud. We write 2/3 of the world's checks in the United States. Frankly, Kenya has a more advanced mobile payments ecosystem than the United States does. Right, so it just depends. Do you want to be the 55th country in the world to fix mobile payments, or do we want to attack this? Right? Now, having said that, there is a cost of replacement here that is higher than anywhere else in the world. So the momentum to replace this infrastructure, or the inertia, has been particularly slow. That's why we're in the situation we are, carrying all this fraud. At the end of the day, you need the movement of someone like Apple to change consumer behavior, paired with this massive fraud issue that's not going away anytime soon. Right?
Stefan, you spent a decade working for Amex in Europe and the UK. Can you give us your insight into EMV transition issues?
I think you're making a great point. It's a real pain to do as you said, actually, the dip, right? Number 3, I mean, the dip and the tap there, whatever. I mean, which frankly, from a working experience, never mind. I'm not going to comment on it. I think, in Europe we had a lot more. It was a different time, frankly, and B, it took us 10 years, David, right, to finally get there, do the liability shift, and there really wasn't an alternative. I do think that when this becomes ubiquitous here, when really everybody forces you to do the dip and the tap, then it does become easier to just wave your phone, and that would cause me to change my behavior. Today I have no problem here at all. The swipe is beautiful. But I'm not sure that I would, to your question, Jason, I wouldn't necessarily say that just because it works frictionlessly in Europe from a transition perspective, the same is the case here. It's a real opportunity, I think, for the alternative players.
Next question.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sabrina Tarani. I have a quick question for Andy. So since currency, I'm assuming, is a consumer-facing application, I'm just wondering, or I'm curious, how you're working with the operating systems, many of whom have or have plans to deploy their own proprietary digital wallets. One for
to enable the currency app to be downloaded and used on their devices, so that you can, whether you're using a 5, 6, a Samsung, whatever the case may be, it would work across those and will be available in their stores for download.
Yeah, hi. I was wondering how meaningful the penetration of services like Braintree and Stripe are today, and where you see that being in a few years. And I guess specifically for Bill, do retailers see that as a threat? Is that something they would try to develop on their own separately, or is that just a service that is helpful for them?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, we have kind of our own version of Stripe or Braintree, Authorized.net and CyberSource. I mean, when I think about it, the innovations that we've seen in payments to a large degree has been driven by these third-party gateways. And so when I think about Stripe or I think about Braintree, I think about a payment enablement gateway that really does, start with kind of mobile out as opposed to, say, the traditional point of sale system in, and is driving a lot of this innovation. And not just here in the US, there are Stripe and Braintree-like companies popping up in virtually every major market around the world. And of course, Stripe is also looking at how it builds out its international strategy as an example. And so I see these technology partners as really important to continue to drive innovation, support the merchants, the issuers, the card networks, to help understand how to optimize what I think has been described already as a really mobile-centric experience. And if you think about the companies you talk about, they really start with mobile first. And if we agree that that's where it's headed, we're going to need some help with some of these innovators. So, we work very closely with companies like that.
As they grow, is scale important? Is that going to be a business that's a natural oligopoly, or is it going to be a highly competitive?
Yeah, the question is around, are we going to see kind of a lot of fragmentation in terms of these gateways, or are we going to see consolidation amongst an oligopoly? I think we're going to see regional oligopolies, right? I think a lot of these because of regulatory concerns or constraints, because of cultural concerns or constraints, we're going to see fragmentation first, and then consolidation amongst a handful of winners, but there'll be a handful of winners in each region that have best addressed kind of the unique attributes of that region.
All right, let me end my geographic bias and come over here to see if there are any questions on this side.
Hi, Doc Searles here. I'd like to represent a party that hasn't been spoken from so far this morning, which is the ordinary consumer, the everyday individual, which all of us are. We have these things called wallets. They are instruments of our own agency. This is not an Apple wallet. This is not a Google wallet. This does not belong to any particular company. Is there hope that we can retain autonomy, agency, and with something that works across all you guys' stuff, the way this thing does?
Well, I think that the digital space is, in a way, less open. If you look at what has happened in the other industries, so take the example of the books. The equivalent of the leather wallet in the example of the books is the bookshelf that you have at home, yes? So with paper books, you could buy any book from any library, from any bookstore, and put it in any bookshelf. With e-books, you can't do that, yes? You cannot buy an e-book from any e-store to put in any e-reader. You have, you have sort of proprietary formats, and you also have a lot of fragmentation of the formats, yes. And you take all of the industries that went through digitization, whether it's book, whether it's movies, whether it's music, you end up with this fragmentation. I think that we're going to end up with the same thing as far as payments and commerce and digital wallets.
Hi, my name is Ariel Steinloff, and full disclosure, I used to work at American Express in a sister group to Stefan's. We were looking at new ventures around specifically e-commerce, and I distinctly remember a colleague of mine saying, we're talking about mobile payments and things we can do with that, but we already have a mobile payment device in our wallets. It's called a credit card, and it works. And you all mentioned the swipe is very easy. So as we look to remove friction and get more consumers to use mobile payments, and I think Stefan also alluded to the opportunity in the upcoming change, what can the networks do? And I recognize that MasterCard and Visa are a little different in that sense. What can they do to bring consumers onto this new experience? And I also know that MasterCard is doing something about this with Quicker and Shop This. So.
Yeah, I think, as I said earlier, there's a really large kind of consumer engagement piece, and it's not just the networks. It's the networks working with merchants and the issuing banks to drive trust, into putting your credentials into mobile, to working hard to build acceptance, particularly in markets like the United States that are behind in terms of NFC acceptance. to remind people that it's secure to pay in an app, when we've made it secure. There's a big consumer engagement, but it's not the networks or the issuers or the merchants. It's all of us. And if you think about it, payments is unique in terms of mobile because it's payments. If you don't get your SMS delivered in 10 seconds or your ringtone doesn't download the first time, that's okay. This is payments, right? So it's going to be longer. There's a longer introduction cycle. There's a longer trust cycle because the stakes are so much higher. It's payments. So it's just going to take a bit longer.
So it's just one other quick point.
Go ahead.
This card, it's dumb, right? It can't tell you anything except approved or declined, and that's the core problem with the current payment ecosystem.
We were commenting it's the wrong card, too.
And it's the wrong card.
I'll show you the app afterward.
Thank you. So meanwhile, back in Malawi, I'd like to challenge the panel to help us think about particularly the data security issues and the data privacy protocol that might develop. I'm not really sure, Bill, whether the informed consent, every use, can we really be thinking about that in this market, or do we need to leapfrog to something different? And the consumer, it seems like you have an opportunity perhaps to just have consumers start at a different point. And again, be thinking about the cheap smartphone environment and the ecosystems there that we have. So this is really to the whole panel, but I bet Bill has things to say.
It's a great point, and you and I have, of course, spent a lot of time talking about the differences and the similarities in these markets. I think because in a lot of these markets, we're talking about literally billions of people, or more than 1 billion people, that may not have a bank account for a long time, but have already been enabled with payment on a mobile phone. Right? In markets like Botswana and others, we've now linked that and given them a physical debit card that ties to their Orange Money accounts, as an example, so they can use at the points of sale, use at ATMs, make e-commerce transactions for the first time. Right? I don't think they've built these elaborate loyalty or marketing schemes on top of them, and so let's just start, by getting them engaged in a scalable and robust and secure payments ecosystem. They'll develop more sophisticated tastes and experiences over time, and we can address issues around privacy, et cetera, at the appropriate time. But there's just a big opportunity to take what's happening in a closed loop with mobile network operators today and working with the networks and working with merchants and banks, expand the ecosystem today. We're going to see leapfrogging. It'll continue to converge, but I think we just need to get the electronification of payments in these markets accelerated almost any way we can.
We have time for just a couple more questions before we have to head to lunch.
Hi, my name's Travis. Question about, mobile apps we're stacked now on the iPhone. You got to navigate through all your apps, and it's really a product of Apple coming up with this new sleek way to interact with a phone. As we move away from eventually having to, because the real estate on our phone just is littered with apps, back to the web, and using beacon technology to let me know that I'm at a bus stop, and therefore I should see the schedules, and I should be able to interact and be able to pay through beacons and other IoT devices. How do you think that'll help or hurt the experience that we talked about, pushing things over the tipping point for EMV and the personal experience of checking out and payments?
Yeah, we haven't. I'm glad you mentioned that. We haven't really talked about how the Internet of Things impacts the move to electronic payments. At our show that we had just last week, the largest exhibitor on our show floor was Intel. What's Intel doing at a payments conference? Well, they're talking about the Internet of Things. What does it mean for us?
Can I take a stab at the question that you asked there? And it's relative because you asked again about a customer experience. And again, the ability to have your phone engage with where you are, when you are, and actually provide meaningful content in something that adds value to you. And it's simple things like getting engagement for drive-through restaurants. And I'm following up on the spice earlier on just because it's fun. We've got merchants who are out there letting you order ahead, and when you actually pull onto the lot of theirs, they will be able to sense that you've hit the lot, and they will drop your order at the time you pull into the drive-through lane, so that by the time you pull around to the drive-through lane, you've effected payment, you're on your way quicker, they've reduced lines, and it's not NFC, it's actually Bluetooth-based on that. So I think cases like that, with what's happening in the phone, people aren't going to have 100 apps on their phone. We're already seeing people spending time dropping. And the numbers we're seeing are if consumers can't use something at least 3 times a week, 50% of them quit within 90 days. And so you've lost that means to engage. So I think there has to be more that people can use in their everyday life. And the more you can enable basically location aware and experience aware, that's actually going to translate into greater adoption. So not a pure Internet of Things, but harvesting the data and taking all those, I think, does play into it on a very base level to get it going.
Yeah, I'd like to add that I think that we're all in agreement that removing friction is clearly a key component of making a very compelling consumer value proposition. I like that maybe for us to take a little bit of a step back, because in a lot of cases, to remove friction, the consumer has to agree to share the data. Yes, and this is where I think that we see a lot of differences between different countries. So if we look at the US, for example, the consumers are much more ready to share their data in a sort of an exchange of value. So if you give me value, I will give you my data. On the contrary, and I think that Stefan, you must have seen this in Europe. In Europe, it's much more most of the consumers, it's, don't touch my data. Even if you give me value, I don't really want to share my data with you. So I think that we have to be extremely respectful of what the consumers want in terms of data privacy. But clearly, the more data is provided, the more we can provide a frictionless experience.
And Mung will get the last word because lunch is served. Leon, congratulations on a terrific program. Thank you for the opportunity to participate. Please join me in thanking all our terrific Thank you. Housekeeping note for lunch. Let's see if I can get this right. Lunch is outside. You're directed to serve yourself, come back inside. And then at 5 of 2 at 1:55, downstairs in room 142.
They know Brian and Alan.
142.
Yeah,
Yeah, good.